Joachim Peiper.
Joachim Peiper. Your life is completely ruined today.
In the dark years of World War II, few names inspired as much fear as Joachim Peiper. A loyal officer of the Schutzstaffel, he rose quickly through the ranks, leaving behind a trail of destruction across Europe. But the war's end did not bring peace to Peiper. Decades later, far from the battlefields, his past would return in a violent and fiery way. Join us in this video as we reveal the story of power, justice, revenge, and the shocking end of one of Nazi Germany's most notorious officers. Shadows of the Past, the final night of Joachim Peiper. By 1976, the quiet life that Joachim Peiper had tried to build in Travis was being slowly swallowed by his dark past. As news of his true identity spread, the community's resentment grew, turning his secluded home into a symbol of a history many wished to forget. Threats began to rise. During the spring and summer, letters arrived frequently, filled with warnings, while local newspapers heightened attention on Peiper's presence in town. Despite the growing danger, Peiper remained. Perhaps out of defiance, or because he had no other choice, he continued to live quietly, ignoring the mounting threats. But his calm resolve would meet a brutal end. On the night of July 14, 1976, Peiper's house was set ablaze in an act of apparent arson. The fire quickly consumed the isolated home, fueled by its remote location and the lack of an immediate firefighting response. When authorities finally arrived at the smoldering wreckage, they found a charred body, later identified through dental records as Peiper. The notorious former SS officer had met a brutal death, seemingly at the hands of those unwilling to let him escape the consequences of his wartime actions. In the aftermath, speculation ran rampant. Some claimed local communists were behind the attack, targeting former Nazis. Others believed vigilantes had taken justice into their own hands. No solid evidence ever emerged, and the culprits were never identified. News of Peiper's death sparked controversy. For some, it was vigilante justice. For others, a stark reminder that the echoes of war and atrocities cannot easily fade, no matter how much time passes. But where did it all begin? Who was Joachim Peiper, and what led to his tragic end? Keep watching to find out. The making of a soldier, Joachim Peiper's early years. Joachim Peiper was born in Berlin, Germany in 1915 into a middle-class family with a proud military tradition. His father, Captain Waldemar Peiper, was a decorated World War I veteran who instilled in his son a fierce sense of nationalism. From an early age, young Joachim was immersed in stories of honor, duty, and Germany's military glory, shaping his worldview and setting him on a path toward becoming an officer in the Schutzstaffel. At the age of 14, Peiper was sent to a cadet school, where his adolescence unfolded within a strict, regimented environment. There, discipline was paramount, and every moment was designed to forge young men into soldiers. Peiper excelled academically and militarily, demonstrating a natural understanding of strategy, tactics, and leadership, skills that would serve as the foundation for his later rise in the SS. In 1933, as Adolf Hitler came to power, Peiper, then just 18, was captivated by the vision of a resurgent Germany. Inspired by nationalism and the promise of a powerful future for his country, he joined the SS, an elite paramilitary force operating outside the traditional military and police structures, directly under Hitler's command. Within this world of rising Nazism, Peiper's ideological alignment with National Socialism became clear, and he devoted himself fully to the movement. Peiper's energy, charisma, and commitment did not go unnoticed.
On the afternoon of the 8th of September 1934, at the annual Nazi Party rally, which was held in the Bavarian city of Nuremberg.
During the Nuremberg rally in 1934, his fervor caught the eye of Heinrich Himmler, the Reichsfuhrer SS. Impressed by the young man's dedication, Himmler appointed him as his personal adjutant, a position granting Peiper unprecedented access to to the top leadership of the Nazi hierarchy. Under Himmler's mentorship, Peiper gained a unique insight into the inner workings of the regime, witnessing firsthand the systematic persecution of Jews and the consolidation of Nazi power. Much like the regime he served, Peiper developed an uncompromising and harsh stance toward Jews and other targeted groups. By 1939, when Germany invaded Poland and ignited World War II, he was already deeply entrenched in the ideology of the SS. During the campaign, he observed executions of civilians, forced deportations, and other acts of ethnic cleansing. Yet rather than being deterred by the horrors around him, Peiper's zeal intensified, propelling him to the front lines where he could actively participate in the brutal machinery of war. Rapidly rising through the ranks, Peiper's leadership, loyalty, and ideological commitment earned him prominence within the SS. He became increasingly enmeshed in the darkest operations of the Nazi regime, preparing him for the brutal and infamous actions that would define his wartime career. By the outbreak of the Second World War, Joachim Peiper was no longer just a soldier. He was a figure deeply intertwined with the machinery of Nazi terror, ready to carry out the regime's most devastating orders. How did young Peiper's ambition shape him for brutal war? Let's find out. Rising through fire. Peiper on the Eastern and Western fronts. Following his experiences during the Polish campaign, Joachim Peiper displayed an unyielding hunger for active combat. He longed to be at the forefront of the battles shaping Europe, and his wish was granted when he was assigned to the Waffen-SS, the elite military wing of the SS poised to play a pivotal role in Germany's expansive war efforts. The French campaign of 1940 became Peiper's first real test of war. Leading his troops through a series of daring assaults, he displayed remarkable bravery and tactical skill, guiding his men to multiple victories against entrenched enemy forces. His courage on the battlefield did not go unnoticed. He was awarded the Iron Cross, First Class, one of Germany's most prestigious military decorations for extraordinary heroism. Yet, this recognition marked only the beginning of a disturbing trajectory, one that would see Peiper shift from decorated officer to accused war criminal. In 1941, Peiper accompanied Heinrich Himmler to the Soviet Union during Operation Barbarossa, the German campaign to seize Soviet territory. Here, Peiper witnessed the systematic extermination of civilians by the Einsatzgruppen, special SS units tasked with mass assassination behind the front lines. The horrors he observed, executions, deportations, and indiscriminate assassinations, seemed to harden rather than deter him. Seeking further proof of his courage, Peiper requested a transfer to a frontline unit, a request that was granted. He joined the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte, SS Adolf Hitler, serving under the command of senior SS officers and testing his abilities in the harsh and unforgiving Russian winter. By the winter of 1943, Peiper had begun to establish a reputation as a fearless and capable leader. During the Third Battle of Kharkov, he demonstrated exceptional strategic acumen, playing a key role in the division's counteroffensive and the recapture of the city from Soviet forces. For these actions, he was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross with oak leaves, one of the highest military honors in Nazi Germany. In the years that followed, Peiper's unit engaged in multiple campaigns across the Eastern Front, earning notoriety for its ruthlessness and relentless conduct. He himself became known as a hard, uncompromising officer, demanding the utmost from his men and showing little tolerance for failure. By 1943, he had been promoted to SS Standartenführer, roughly equivalent to a colonel, and was put in command of the 1st SS Panzer Regiment of the Leibstandarte Division, leading it through a series of intense operations. However, the tide of war began to turn. By the end of 1943, the once unstoppable German war machine was faltering. The decisive defeat at Stalingrad and the mounting strength of the Allied forces began to slow the Axis advance. Yet Peiper remained resolute, leading his regiment in fierce engagements, often against overwhelming odds. His unwavering commitment and aggressive tactics carried him and his men across the Eastern Front and into Western Europe. ultimately taking them to the snow-covered forests of Belgium. There, as the war approached its grim final chapters, Peiper and his regiment would commit one of the most infamous massacres of the Second World War, forever cementing his place in history as both a skilled military officer and a figure of brutal terror. As victories mounted, did Peiper's command lead to disaster next? Stay tuned to find out. The Ardennes Offensive, Peiper's deadly advance. In the autumn of 1944, as Allied forces pressed relentlessly against German defenses, the Wehrmacht struggled to hold the line along the Siegfried Line. Adolf Hitler, seeking a way to regain the initiative on the Western Front, devised a bold and desperate strategy: the Ardennes Offensive.
Hitler ignores his generals' warnings and orders them to start planning an offensive to capture neutral Belgium and the Netherlands and occupy enough of northern France to be able to strike at Britain.
This plan aimed to break through the dense forests of the Ardennes, cross the River Meuse, and seize the vital Belgian city of Antwerp. By doing so, the German forces hoped to divide the Allied front, disrupt supply lines, and turn the tide of the war in Germany's favor. The 6th Panzer Army was tasked with the critical role of penetrating the American lines between Aachen and the Schnee-Eifel, ultimately capturing the bridges over the Meuse River near Liège. Within this army, the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, was designated as the primary mobile strike force under the command of SS Oberführer Wilhelm Mohnke. Among its formations, Peiper led Kampfgruppe Peiper, the best equipped and most formidable battle group, which included the 501st Heavy Panzer Battalion, armed with massive 70-ton Tiger II tanks. The mission assigned to Peiper was clear yet formidable: to capture the Meuse bridges between Liège and Huy and secure fuel from U.S. Army depots along the route to sustain the armored advance. Kampfgruppe Peiper faced immediate logistical challenges. The designated routes were narrow, winding, and often reduced to single-lane roads, forcing infantry, armored vehicles, and tanks to travel in a long, stretched convoy approximately 25 kilometers, 16 miles, in length. Peiper complained that these roads were suitable only for bicycles, not tanks. But the Army's Chief of Staff, Fritz Kramer, dismissed his concerns with a blunt command: "I don't care how and what you do. Just make it to the Meuse, even if you've only one tank left when you get there." The operation faced further delays. Peiper's vehicles reached the point of departure only at midnight, postponing the attack by nearly 24 hours. The original plan called for the advance through Losheimer Graben, but the 2 infantry divisions tasked with clearing the route failed to do so on the first day. Undeterred, Kampfgruppe Peiper pressed forward. On the morning of December 17th, Peiper's forces captured Hansfeld, along with the U.S. Army's fuel stores, securing vital resources for the continued advance. Despite this success, the terrain and obstacles continued to challenge Peiper. The road soon became impassable a short distance from Ligneville, forcing his units to take an alternative route. This detour directed them toward the Baugneis crossroads, near Malmedy, Belgium, a location that would soon become infamous. Every mile of the advance brought Peiper and his men closer to the collision with history, as the combination of strategy, urgency, and brutal efficiency would culminate in one of the most notorious events of the Ardennes Offensive. But did Peiper's advance unleash horrors beyond the battlefield itself? Keep watching to find out. The Malmedy Massacre and the Shadow of Atrocities. On December 17, 1944, as Joachim Peiper advanced through the Ardennes, his armored units and half-tracks encountered a lightly armed convoy of approximately 30 American vehicles at the Baugneis crossroads near Malmedy, Belgium. The American troops, primarily members of the 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion, were quickly overwhelmed and captured by Peiper's forces. What followed would become one of the most notorious war crimes of the Western Front. The captured soldiers, along with others taken earlier, were forced to stand in a snow-covered meadow. Without warning, the Germans opened fire with machine guns, assassinating 84 men and leaving their bodies to lie frozen in the snow. A few survivors managed to escape and eventually reached American lines, spreading news of the atrocity across the front and igniting outrage among Allied troops. The horror of Malmedy quickly became a symbol of the brutality of the Ardennes offensive, etched into both American memory and wartime records. The violence did not end at Malmedy. In nearby Hunsfeld, Peiper's men executed several additional American prisoners. Reports of assassinations extended further to Bullingen, Ligneville, Stavelot, Chanut, La Glaise, and Stoumont over the following days, December 17th through 21st, illustrating the widespread nature of the atrocities committed by Kampfgruppe Peiper. The assassinations were not limited to soldiers. On December 19th, in the area between Stavelot and Trois Ponts, German troops attempting to secure control of the bridge over the Amblève River also committed acts of extreme brutality against Belgian civilians, including rape and assassination. These civilians, caught in the crossfire of a desperate military operation, became additional victims of the campaign's relentless violence. Ultimately, the combined actions of Peiper's battle group were held responsible for the deaths of 362 prisoners of war and 111 civilians. The scale and systematic nature of these assassinations revealed the dark side of Peiper's military career, a commander capable of strategic brilliance on the battlefield, yet willing to commit unspeakable acts of cruelty against those who had no means to defend themselves. The events at Malmedy and surrounding towns remain some of the starkest examples of the human cost of war, and they left a permanent mark on Peiper's legacy, haunting him even decades later. After war crimes, how did Peiper face justice and freedom? Stay tuned to find out more. From prison to parole, Peiper's post-war life. On July 16, 1946, in the somber shadow of the former concentration camp at Dachau, Joachim Peiper was sentenced to death by hanging. The charge? His involvement in the deaths of 71 surrendered American soldiers at a crossroads near Malmedy, Belgium, on December 17, 1944. The following day, he was transferred to the fortress at Landsberg prison, a grim site steeped in history, where Adolf Hitler had once been imprisoned in 1925 and had penned the infamous Mein Kampf. For Peiper, the sentence marked the beginning of a new chapter, one that would slowly transform his life from feared SS officer to a man navigating the rules of post-war Germany. After years behind bars, Peiper's fate changed with parole, ordered by the U.S. commander in West Germany, General H.I. Hodes. His release was set to last until May 21, 1980, but it came with strict restrictions. Peiper was confined to the Stuttgart area and required to report to his American parole officer, Paul J. Gernert, twice each month on the 1st and 15th.
At the end of the Second World War, he was brought to trial and was then accused of war crimes and was sentenced to death. But despite this, he would have his death sentence commuted to time imprisonment.
The restrictions extended to his family life as well. His wife, Sigurd, and their 3 children had initially remained in their home in Rottach am Tegernsee during Peiper's early years of imprisonment. In November 1955, she relocated to Sinsheim in Baden-Württemberg to be closer to him. Until she could move again to the Stuttgart area, Peiper was only allowed to visit his family on weekends and holidays, and always by the most direct route possible. Even in freedom, his life was regimented, echoing the discipline of his military years. While in Landsberg, Peiper made efforts to adapt to civilian life. He earned an interpreter's diploma in English and spent his time productively in the prison garden, the motor pool, and even engaged in bookbinding. Yet, despite these efforts, his practical qualifications for post-war employment were minimal, leaving him largely dependent on outside support. His German parole supervisor, Dr. Theodor Knapp, and his sponsor, Alfred de Meite, the personnel chief of the Porsche Motor Company, provided crucial assistance. Thanks to this connection, Peiper secured a position as a clerk in the Vehicle Assembly and Construction Office at the Porsche factory in Zuffenhausen, granting him a foothold in the civilian world after years of confinement. Peiper's first post-war home reflected both his constrained freedom and the cautious reintegration into society. He became a tenant at the residence of Dr. Hartmann on Klagenfurtstrasse 4 in Stuttgart, a modest and practical arrangement befitting a man under parole restrictions. In many ways, these years symbolized the stark contrast between his past and present. From commanding troops and armored divisions across Europe to performing routine tasks in a factory office, Peiper's life had shifted dramatically. Yet, even in this regulated post-war existence, the shadow of his past lingered, a reminder that the weight of history and human memory would follow him to the very end of his days. But did freedom truly free Peiper from his past? Let's find out. A bitter return. Peiper's post-war struggles. By 1956, Joachim Peiper had become a bitter and deeply disillusioned man. The collapse of the Third Reich had left him bereft. But more than that, it had destroyed the family to which he had devoted his adult life. The Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler. For nearly 6 years, Peiper had lived by the division's motto, "My honor is my loyalty." That loyalty had sustained him through countless battles, harsh winters, and the chaos of war. Yet, when confronted with the realities of defeat and justice, that same loyalty evaporated. At the U.S. interrogation center in Schwäbisch Hall, Peiper faced the ultimate betrayal. Even his former adjutant, once a comrade in arms, testified against him, shaking the foundations of his belief in comradeship. Reflecting on the betrayal years later, Peiper said in 1948, "From this moment on, everything was a matter of indifference to me. My confidence in our comradeship was broken, and I felt only physical disgust against my adjutant." These words revealed the depth of his disillusionment, the personal and psychological toll of his imprisonment, and the collapse of the world he had devoted his life to defending. He was a man stripped not only of freedom, but of the social and emotional anchors that had guided him through life, leaving him isolated and resentful. Peiper's parole officially ended on June 21, 1958. But the challenges of reintegration were only beginning. In 1961, his abilities finally gained some recognition when Ferry Porsche, the head of Porsche Motor Company, appointed him as company secretary, the first non-family member to hold the role. Yet even this achievement proved fleeting. The powerful German labor union, IG Metall, objected vehemently. While they could tolerate Peiper as a low-level clerk, they refused to allow a former condemned war criminal to enter management and threatened a public campaign against Porsche if the appointment proceeded. With little choice, Porsche rescinded the appointment. Peiper threatened legal action, but eventually settled for 6 months' salary and compensation. The union's warning went further. He would be similarly shunned in any company employing their workers, leaving him with limited options for stable employment. Forced to adapt, Peiper turned to independent work. He became a sales promoter, first for a Volkswagen dealer in Reutlingen, and later in Offenburg and Freiburg, also taking on promotion work for a carpentry firm in Offenburg. Despite the modesty of these roles, Peiper remained determined to survive within post-war society, navigating a world that both feared and condemned his past. By April 1967, he had returned to Stuttgart, living at Schnellbachstrasse 32, still engaged in similar work. Peiper's bitterness and ideological conviction remained unabated. In an interview with a French writer that same year, he candidly expressed his worldview. "I was a Nazi, and I remain one." The Germany of today is no longer a great nation. It has become a province of Europe. That is why, at the first opportunity, I shall settle elsewhere. In France, no doubt. I don't particularly care for Frenchmen, but I love France. Of all things, the materialism of my compatriots causes me pain. These words reveal a man frozen in the past, loyal to an ideology that had failed him, and alienated from the society he now inhabited. Peiper's life after the war was not one of ease or quiet reflection, but of persistent struggle, disappointment, and a relentless sense of injustice. A man haunted not just by the world around him, but by his own unyielding loyalty to a past that could never be restored. Seeking escape, do you think Peiper finally outran his shadow? Keep watching to find out. A new life in Treves. Peiper settles in France. On December 11, 1968, Joachim Peiper and 2 of his former officers faced accusations in a German court for the assassination of Italian civilians in 1943. The case was brought by Italian authorities and 9 plaintiffs from the small northern Italian town of Boves. Peiper's unit had been stationed in the area after participating in the disarmament of the Italian army in August 1943. The allegations stemmed from an incident the following November, when 2 of his non-commissioned officers were allegedly kidnapped by Italian soldiers. Reacting with characteristic decisiveness, Peiper led his battalion to rescue his men. Upon arrival, his unit shelled the town using 150mm artillery, successfully retrieving the kidnapped officers but causing the deaths of 34 Italian civilians. The court heard depositions from 17 Italian witnesses and 126 former members of Peiper's battalion. In February 1969, the court ruled that there was insufficient evidence to lay formal charges against Peiper, allowing him to avoid further legal repercussions for the incident. Following these turbulent years, Peiper sought a quieter life. During the winter of 1970 to 1971, he and his wife moved to a small house they had built on their land by the Saône River in Trèves. The French authorities, fully aware of Peiper's identity and wartime history, granted him a residence permit on April 27, 1972, initially valid until February 27, 1977. While the Peipers were not wealthy, their children had grown and left home, allowing them to live quietly and modestly in the village of Trèves, alongside the 280 other inhabitants. Their home, known as Le Renfort, the reinforcement, was situated roughly 400 meters from the edge of the village. The nearest neighbor, Erwin Kettelhout, a former Leibstandarte artillery captain, lived about 250 meters farther west. Le Renfort was built on a high bank overlooking the river, well back from the country road leading into the village. The house itself was modest but functional, with 3 bedrooms, a vestibule, a cloakroom, a kitchen, a living room, and a study on the main floor, and a utility room and bathroom on the lower ground floor. A terrace ran along the side of the house with a veranda at one end next to the study. High trees surrounded the property, providing privacy, while a barbed wire fence separated Peiper's land from a meadow that stretched toward the village road, creating both a physical and symbolic boundary between Peiper and the local community. Despite the seclusion, the Peiper family maintained ties to the wider world. His son, Heinrich, worked as a solicitor in Frankfurt. His daughter, Elke, pursued a career as a professor in Munich, and his youngest daughter, Silke, resided in Hamburg. Though distant from his immediate family, Peiper could still enjoy periodic visits and a degree of domestic stability. In many ways, Trèves represented a chance for Peiper to rebuild a semblance of a peaceful life, removed from the scrutiny of the wider public, yet always carrying the shadows of his past, which would eventually catch up with him in this quiet French village. But how long could peace survive once truth surfaced? Let's find out. Rising tensions, the hate campaign in Trèves. Although the Peipers generally kept to themselves, the few contacts they had in Trèves were reportedly cordial, at least until the summer of 1976, when a storm of public hostility began to gather around them.
And he lived for decades inside a country where he committed many crimes, France. However, when his location was discovered in the 1970s, Joachim Peiper would be slaughtered inside his own home in a reprisal for his actions decades after World War II had ended.
The turning point came in June, when a deliberate campaign of intimidation and exposure against Joachim Peiper erupted, targeting the former SS officer in his quiet French village. On June 21st, leaflets were distributed throughout Trèves, boldly proclaiming, "People of Trèves, a war criminal, SS Peiper, is amongst us." The text called explicitly for his expulsion from France and painted Peiper as a lingering symbol of wartime atrocities. The following day, the national newspaper L'Humanité published an article echoing these demands, framing Peiper's presence in the village as a moral outrage that needed addressing. Within days, the campaign spread like wildfire. French newspapers nationwide and even some international publications joined the chorus, ensuring that Peiper's name, past, and notoriety were broadcast far beyond the borders of Trèves. The intimidation extended beyond print. Walls and roads in the surrounding area were defaced with swastikas, SS runes, and Peiper's name, marking his presence in the village as a provocation. The campaign, orchestrated largely by local communists, was framed as an act of moral vigilance. They claimed that by exposing Peiper's background, they were merely giving voice to the indignation and outrage felt by the local population. For Peiper, however, the effect was isolating and relentless, turning his carefully maintained life of quiet seclusion into one of constant scrutiny and tension. Peiper sought official protection. He lodged complaints with the French police in Vesoul, who agreed to assign a guard, but only during the daytime. Beyond that, he was largely left to face the campaign on his own. The West German embassy in Paris could offer little more than sympathy, advising him to leave the area temporarily if he felt unsafe. Despite these measures, the public pressure continued to mount, leaving Peiper and his family increasingly vulnerable in the small village they had chosen as a sanctuary. On June 23rd, Peiper spoke publicly to a French newspaper reporter, attempting to address the storm of accusations and outrage swirling around him. When questioned about his Nazi past, he responded with a calm, deflecting tone. "That is a ridiculous question. I was young and idealistic against Bolshevism. I do not understand why people keep dragging up history. As the Italians say, the coffee is cold. Today, it is time for reconciliation in Europe." His words reflected both a desire to move beyond the past and a frustration at being continually judged for events decades earlier. Regarding his role in the SS, Peiper offered a similar defense. "I was not political. I was never a member of the Nazi Party. I was a soldier." In these statements, he attempted to distinguish between his actions as a military officer and the broader ideology of the regime he had served, framing himself as a man shaped by circumstance rather than political conviction. Yet, for the villagers and much of the wider public, such distinctions mattered little. The growing anger, fueled by newspapers, leaflets, and graffiti, created a climate of tension and hostility that soon turned deadly, turning the quiet life of Peiper's family into a daily negotiation with fear and exposure. So, what do you think about how Joachim Peiper met his end? Let us know in the comments section below. From the battlefields of Europe to the quiet village of Traves, Joachim Peiper left a legacy marked by violence, controversy, and a life that could never escape the shadows of his past. Every chapter of his story, from his rise in the SS to his violent end, reflects the enduring consequences of war and ideology. If the end of Joachim Peiper, the SS officer, burned alive. After World War II captivated you, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, then click the next video to uncover more untold stories from the darkest corners of history.